This is Dan Kedme, a producer on the Webby Award-winning podcast Masters of Scale. On our show, our host, Reid Hoffman, founder of LinkedIn, shares some truly surprising tales of scale. We've also asked our sponsor, the Mastercard Center for Inclusive Growth, to share their own tales of scale. How do they help build and contribute to thriving economies? They offered a series of solutions that you can hear throughout our show, or you can listen right now. Up next, Data slays the monster.
It's the cradle of jazz. It's where African-American art and culture used to thrive. And then in the 1960s, the monster came.
That's Parag Mehta, Executive Director of Mastercard Center for Inclusive Growth. He's describing the Claiborne Corridor in New Orleans, a once thriving, middle-class African-American community. And the monster? It was as destructive as Godzilla. Only in this case, the monster was real.
That's what they call it. They call it the monster. And it's the Interstate 10 highway. And this highway basically cut off the Claiborne Corridor from the rest of the community and tore apart the nature and the characteristics of that beautiful neighborhood. And the result was that these small businesses that had been thriving and that had led to this wonderful black middle class started going out of business.
Before Interstate 10, the Claiborne Corridor centered around a wide promenade of towering oak trees, lined with more than 300 black-owned businesses. The promenade was ripped up to make way for this elevated 6-lane interstate. If you've taken a taxi from the airport to the French Quarter, you've driven over what's left of the neighborhood.
Fast forward to 2005, Hurricane Katrina hits. And at that point, more than 40% of the people living in the Claiborne Corridor neighborhood were living in poverty, and it just basically decimated this community.
A researcher at the University of New Orleans named Dr. Michelle Thompson believed there was a way to revitalize Claiborne, but she needed to see the numbers.
So we matched Dr. Thompson with about 60 data scientists from across Mastercard. And in February of 2019, these data scientists basically locked themselves in a room for a 36-hour datathon where they looked at transaction data in this community and were able to pull some insights.
The data they pulled, it flew in the face of lazy assumptions.
For example, between 2015 and 2018, the consumer spending in this cultural and innovation district was 12 times greater than spending all across the city of New Orleans. A place, remember, that had been written off, blocked by the monster highway.
The numbers made it clear. The residents of the Claiborne Corridor spent their money inside the neighborhood, at legacy businesses that had been there for generations. So the answer would lie in economic development that helps those businesses, instead of pushing them out.
We shared the insights with the local policymakers, and now you're starting to see this whole effort across the city, from the housing department to the economic development organizations, that are really trying to promote small business development and small business investments in Claiborne. And that's social impact, using something that we're really good at and putting it to work to solve a social problem. And that's what led us to this idea of a pro bono or a low bono type service, where just like lawyers do pro bono work for clients who can't afford to pay, but have really interesting cases and worthwhile cases to pursue, what if Mastercard, as a technology payment company, could loan out some time of our data scientists to go help researchers, to go help community advocates, to go help policymakers figure out how to create an evidence base to do the right thing for their communities?
The program Mastercard created to lend out their data scientists for pro bono or low bono work. It started with the Datathon in New Orleans.
For us at Mastercard, what this whole exercise taught us is that we knew we had this incredible resource in the form of our data scientists. I think we have something like 600 data scientists across the entire company. So the question was, how can we take this one example of what we did in New Orleans, and how can we scale it? How could we apply those data scientists and match them to places where there's a need for their expertise?
Parag and his team at Mastercard soon learned, when you loan out your data scientists, unexpected things happen.
A few weeks after the New Orleans Datathon, one of our lead data people at our office in India connected the dots and said, bring it to India. I want to do this with my data scientists in the India offices. I want to put those insights to work for the communities that we live in, because then they get to see the impact of what they did. And to me, I think that's really important when it comes to recruiting and retaining the best people in the business, something that all of us are competing for. When you offer people programs like that, they feel a greater connection to the place that they work.
If your organization has data scientists or other teams of skilled smarties you can put to use for the greater good, The Mastercard Center for Inclusive Growth wants to hear from you. Email them at scale@mastercard.com. That's scale@mastercard.com.